Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Shaheen Samavati, host of the Content Mix podcast, brought to you by multilingual content marketing agency Vera Content. Today, I'm joined by our special guest, Niki Albon, head of creative at the award-winning influencer marketing agency Cherry Pick Talent, to talk about how to get influencer partnerships right. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, to give people a little more context, you're an influencer turned influencer marketer. So, you've advised and collaborated with some of the world's biggest brands, including Google, Samsung, Coca-Cola, 20th Century Fox, and charities such as Stand Up to Cancer. You call yourself an ex-influencer. You've been over 10 years working on your own channels. And now Niki's using his firsthand contextual knowledge and experience as head of creative at Cherry Pick Talent, where he develops innovative influencer strategies and campaigns and heads up the entire creative process from concept stage through to pitching and campaign reporting. So I think, does that cover it?
You gave me the best elevator pitch that I've ever heard for myself. I will add one thing. I had roughly across all of my social media 400,000 followers. So it was my full-time shtick for. I would say we were doing it. I did it with my brother. Did it for 10 years. But I would say it was my full-time job for 7 of those 10 years. This was before the word influencer existed. So yeah, it's been a wild ride, and I'm really pleased to be in a position now where I can use that knowledge and that insight that I had as someone that was a creator, to work with the new wave or current generation of creators, in a way that I hope is beneficial to the industry, but also to the creators that we work with, because there are a lot of Wild West cowboys out there, and I don't want to be one of them. So yeah, I'm really grateful for the journey that I've had and the experience that I've got, and I hope that it's making an impact in a good way.
Yeah, so could you tell us how did you get to influencer status and what does it really mean to be an influencer? And do you have to have 400,000 followers to be considered an influencer? What's the cutoff?
Oh, these are some good questions already. So,
Mm,
in its very basic form, an influencer is someone that can influence the opinion or purchasing behavior of an
mm,
audience. Um, so do you need 400,000 followers to be an influencer? Absolutely not. Um, at Cherry Pick, we work with influencers across the spectrum, from the Mr. Beasts of the world with millions and millions of audience members, to micro influencers that may have 500 to 1,000. Um, they're different brackets on the same spectrum, um, and there is kind of I'd say a new terminology. It's kind of an adjacent terminology called a key opinion leader, which is, in my opinion, something you would find a little bit more regularly on LinkedIn, or in Discord. These kind of campfire social media presences where people are sharing thoughts and opinions. Reddit is another good example, around smaller audiences, but they themselves are very influential. I kind of think of it like the cool kid in the group of friends, where their network is quite small, but they hold a lot of sway over them with their influence. Um, so there's also key opinion leaders, which, more and more frequently we're being approached about, because it is interchangeable at this point with the best kind of influencer.
yeah.
Influencers that are known for a skill, whether that's art, music, dance, or insight. So I think of creators like Philosophy Tube on YouTube, where they make content around philosophical topics in a digestible and approachable way. Um, they themselves, these creators, are experts in their field, and I would consider them key opinion leaders. But they actually have the influence of a traditional influencer.
Mhm. Yeah, I think people often think of influencers like being a synonym for celebrity, basically, but I guess
Mm,
it's a sign of also how things have changed and our way we communicate has changed, and who controls the kind of communication, so it's kind of like anyone can put things out there now,
yeah.
and level of influence can be very high or lower, but there's, like you said, it depends on kind of the I guess you can be much more granular in the audience you want to reach with the types of people you collaborate with who are putting content out online, and it's very different
hmm
than in the past. Right?
It's really interesting. Like with celebrity, I find I've had the opportunity to work with influencers that have grown their own audience,
Mm,
and influencers that have come off the back of reality TV shows, that kind of
Hmm.
trajectory. And there is a very marked difference between the approach that these two groups have to their audiences. So, an influencer that has built their own audience, I'm not saying any less, I'm not saying that in a way that disparages the work of someone that has gone onto reality TV. Like, that's a whole separate journey. But in terms of the quality of relationship that influencers that have built their own audience have with their audience is, for me, it's like miles and leagues apart. Because they have generated that audience through sort of hard work and diligence, sharing content that they have themselves worked on. Um, Whereas the relationship with celebrities and their audiences, it's different. There isn't perhaps this feeling of being as beholden to them in terms of what they would like to see from you. They kind of give them what they're going to get, whereas an influencer has a more democratic relationship with their audience. I mean, at the end of the day, they're still calling the shots, but they're very much invested in what their audience would like to see from them, and that always plays out in the quality of the content that we receive. From a branded perspective, I find that influencers that have built their own audiences take the time to read the brief, ideate on a concept. Very often with me, where we'll sit down and have a chat and be like, okay, that was your understanding of the brief. Either A, yes, you got it, or B, let's have another go. And they're like, cool, let's make this work, because I want to make something that ultimately works for my audience. And that kind of guides us in everything we do at Cherry Pick. As being head of creative, it may seem kind of counterintuitive, but very often the whole play here is to let an influencer do what they've been doing best without being too heavy-handed and taking too much of a vice grip on the production of the content. So I am there, but oftentimes, like, we very much take the influencer's lead, because I don't want them to create something they don't care about or their audience isn't interested in, because that defeats the whole point.
I was wondering, well, a bunch of things, but well, which I guess what types of campaigns you typically work on, if you can give us an
Mm-hmm.
example, and maybe like the platforms that you work with the most. I know that you were really influential in YouTube as a YouTuber. Is that still the channel that you're most expert in, or do you work more with other channels? And also kind of just how things have changed over the years. You
Mm-hmm.
started in 2012, so maybe other channels are more important these days. Can you, or equally important? YouTube is still super important, of course. So yeah,
Yeah,
tell me
yeah.
what's the landscape these days? What are you kind of focused on?
So the big three,
Mhm.
four, kind of. So we cut our teeth on YouTube, both at Cherry Pick and also for myself.
Mhm.
YouTube is something I care very much about, just because I grew up watching it and it's something that I personally enjoy watching. It's very millennial of me. Um, I like it as a platform to work on because it has a longer tail to it, meaning that um, if you do a campaign with a YouTuber, that video will continue to convert forevermore, because it's live for a long time. YouTube has a much better ability of resurfacing old content with audiences. So there's YouTube. There's also YouTube Shorts, which um, uh, is great. I love YouTube Shorts. I think that it was an underdog and kind of seen as a copycat for a long time. But actually, if you think of YouTube as arguably the home for video on the internet, even still to this day, I think YouTube Shorts makes total sense, and creators are using it really effectively uh, to build audiences on YouTube if they had come from TikTok, for example. So we use YouTube Shorts as well. TikTok is, I would say, a huge focus for us. Um, Primarily because for an awareness play, if you're looking to build an awareness around a product, um, not necessarily drive clicks or installs, which we'll get to at a later date, I'm sure. But for an awareness point of view, TikTok is huge. It is global, with a few exceptions. Obviously, its future is uncertain still to this day, but as time passes, the longer these decisions take to make, the more ingrained it becomes in people's browsing habits. So TikTok is another focus. Instagram stories, particularly, is a big focus. It has an unparalleled user journey. You know, if you are an influencer and you're marketing a product, like, hey, buy this water bottle, and the link is right there for people to click on within the content, they can then travel out and download or purchase that product pretty seamlessly. So as a user journey, it's great. And very often we like supplement existing campaigns with Instagram stories because it just goes hand in hand. I'd say Reels is short form in general is great. Reels comes to the bottom of the pile when we tend to work with influencers because we prioritize TikTok or YouTube Shorts because I find that the reach is better and the platforms are just easier to browse. I find Reels, on a personal point of view, still feels like an afterthought, even though it's a huge focus for Instagram. So that's just me. But short form, we try and secure sort of cross posting where possible because even though someone's audience might be similar size across platforms, it's extremely likely. In fact, it's 100% certain that the audiences across each of those platforms are marginally different because the demographics that use TikTok are different to those that use YouTube and those that use Instagram. So oftentimes it makes sense to like secure more posting for a piece of content across platforms because you're going to hit different audiences even with the same influencer. And then for the type of campaigns we work on, primarily gaming campaigns. We work a lot with Epic Games. We work a lot with Playtika, who develop some of the biggest games in the world on mobile. Outfit 7, who developed My Talking Tom. We actually just closed out a campaign on them for My Talking Tom 2 with Mr. Beast, which was really cool. But we also do work with lifestyle brands. We also work with products in verticals outside of gaming. But for the most part, gaming is one of my key focuses because firstly, I am a gamer, and secondly, I play Fortnite. So I love working on the marketing for Fortnite. But yeah, we kind of cover all verticals. Is a long answer to a short question.
Yeah, okay. So, and I guess maybe the agency started out in the gaming and it's kind of like expanded to more things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
our first client, so our founder Brit used to work at a MCN, which are kind of a dying breed at this point, but they're a
Mm-hmm.
multi-channel network that run advertising on YouTube content with
Mm-hmm.
top creators. But she left an MCN and founded Cherry Pick, and our first, she might correct me on this, but our first client was Best Fiends, the mobile game. And it got to the point where we were running sort of like monthly, quarterly budgets with them to work with influencers all over the world. So they were the first kind of main client, and to this day we still work with the team that have since moved on and gone to different projects. But yeah, it's mostly
Mm-hmm.
gaming, but I would say over the last year that's definitely become less of a case.
Yeah, well, so this would actually lead me to, I do have the question about kind of like how do you make these relationships with all these influencers around the world? And but it's also to the question I wanted to ask you next, which is about like when a new brand comes to you, how do you kick off the collaboration and like what comes first, the creative campaign idea or the influencer partnership? Are you like, I want to work with that influencer, so we're going to come up with a campaign for them, or is it like I have this campaign idea, I'm going to find the right influencer, or kind of what's your
Mhm.
process?
I would say 80% of the time it's the latter. So,
Mm,
because a lot of brands are coming to us for our expertise in the space.
mm,
So, let's make up a brand. Coca-Cola come to
mm,
us and they'll be like, "Hey, we're launching this product. Help us." So the first
mm,
port of call is first and foremost is to understand what their view of success is. Like, what
mm,
do you want from this campaign? If you're a mobile game, that is obviously driving downloads and increasing installs, um, and ultimately purchases in the game. So if that's a mobile app, that's the goal. So first of all, we understand the goal. The second is understand kind of this is normally a whole call, but like understanding the brand's tone of voice and who they've worked with in the past and any call outs they've had from those experiences so we can avoid them from the get go. Like, there's no point us say they don't like working with gamers and then we go away and shortlist just gamers. That's obviously not understanding the brand or the brief. Um, but we try very hard to slot into the team, um, which we find super successful for us in terms of campaign management, but also understanding the brand, and becoming integral to their marketing because very often influencers is a secondary thought rather than a primary. And if it can be involved in the mix from the get go, you have a much more first of all easy time with both the brand and the client, sorry, and the creator, but also your the campaign idea as a whole will fit in much more easily to kind of the overall arcing campaign. So if that's out of home or paid media, they've also got an influencer spend that makes sense. So we'll go away, shortlist creators, present these creators. They will go through and look at them and let us know, hey, if you missed the mark, which never happens. Or they'll be like, hey, this is perfect. These are the ones we like. Here's our priority. And then we'll go away and tap into these creators. And kind of to your first question, how do we have these relationships? I feel like relationships are at the very core of what we do, whether that is between us and a creator, us and the brand, or the talents management, because very often this is a very professionalized space now. Creators have management. This is like underpins everything I do. Life is too short not to have a good time at work. So if, we aren't negotiating with creators easily in a way that's understandable in plain English and everything is transparent with the creator, that's just bad juju. Like, I don't want to work with a creator and for them to think that we are pulling the wool over their eyes. If the goalposts keep changing, if the goalposts do change, and that's not any fault of our own or the creators, we're just going to let them know. So like, hey, the brand's had to push this back a month. We wanted to be clear with you. This is nothing to, no reflection of your content. This is what happened. Because a lot of time creators are working alone. Like, they work alone in their rooms or wherever they work from, typically their room, on content, and they do require, and I speak from experience, they do require not necessarily hand holding, because I think that's slightly condescending, but they do require a flow of information that helps them understand that if something's going wrong, it's not their fault, or if something has been done wrong or hasn't followed a brief, that we're there to work through that with them, not to tell them off and threaten to pull the contract. Or, I mean, there are exceptions to this rule. But we work with the creator to make them feel supported rather than just cut loose. And so over the 10 years that we've been, 8 years that we've been doing this, we come back to talent again and again with different partners because we know that we can work well with them and that they're trustable. They trust us and we trust them.
Hmm. Yeah, it's similar to PR, essentially. It's modern
Hmm.
PR, influencer marketing, no? Like building those relationships with the media, but the
Yeah.
media are
Do you know what?
social
As you
media
say that though,
influencers.
like, it's true, but like as you say
Mm,
that, speaking with my influencer hat on,
mm,
um, I obviously come up against agencies that I worked with as an influencer, and they
mm,
will talk the talk, but they do not walk the walk. So,
mm.
so an airplane is landing in my garden. I'm just gonna shut this window.
No
So
worries.
yeah, they don't walk the walk in that they will say things like, um, we care about our relationships with the creators and all this stuff. But very often I was waiting, 1 month plus, 2 months plus, 3 months plus to be paid for a campaign, which is unacceptable, first and foremost. And also, like, there are so many reasons why that's wrong. Let's not go into it. Or campaigns would be cancelled and I wouldn't get the insight as to why. Or an offer would be on the table and it's pulled away very quickly. Obviously things like that do happen, but there are agencies that I rub shoulders with now that I had that experience with on multiple occasions, and it's all very well for someone at the head of the company to be like, we're the originators of influencer marketing, we treat creators with respect. But actually, my experience
Actually
was not
don't.
that. Yeah,
Mm,
and it's a shame because I think like a high tide rises all ships, and I think that if we can treat creators fairly across the board, it's only going to lead to an easier working environment, fairer treatment for everyone across the board, and just it's going to be so much more pleasant. So yeah, that's my little soapbox that I'm standing on today. Is that I think that creators should be treated with respect because it just levels up the whole thing for everyone.
yeah, and it makes them eager to work with you again in the future and maybe choosing working with you over working with other brands that are, yeah, not.
And that happens very
Mm,
frequently with if a brand is using a different agency and we happen
mm,
to reach out to the same creator, which is like not at the end of the world, it happens.
mm,
A lot of these brands will use different agencies in different markets, but there's overlap. As I said, like if someone's in Spain, they speak English. Like there's just a little bit of crossover. I would say 90% of the time, I won't say 100 because that's too big-headed, but 90% of the time, a creator will be like, hey, I've been reached out to by this other agency, but I would rather work with you. And we'll just take that to the brand because what else can we do? But yeah, it happens. So
Yeah.
treat people nicely.
Absolutely. So could you give us an example of a successful campaign that you've worked on, and tell us a bit about like how do you measure success and kind of what metrics and KPIs
Mm.
you look at? Mm.
Yeah, so um, I'll answer the second part first. So in terms
Mhm.
of what we're looking for a campaign, it will differ per beat. So if you are a homeware brand company, so we worked, actually, here's a good example. We worked with a brand called Poster Lounge, which is a Desenio type poster delivery company. And their KPI was increasing sales. That's it. Like that's the goal. They're a product, they want to sell more. So it was important to understand that for us from the get-go. Um, so for us, the easiest way to track success if the client isn't willing to share how many sales they've made. Fortunately, this client was, because it's a piece of the puzzle. Like the more we know, the bigger a picture we can paint. So for us, all we could track was link clicks, because our job is to drive people to the store. But if the store isn't doing its job, then they're not going to buy. And that's very often something. So, for example, if we're driving someone to the App Store, if the app page looks ugly or doesn't represent the game properly, doesn't sell it adequately, then we've done our end of the bargain. But if they don't do the install, then it's like there's only so much we can do. We can get people to the door, but if they don't choose to buy, that's not on us. Um, so for us, very often it does boil down to simple metrics like link clicks. For an awareness campaign, which isn't driving installs, which isn't driving sales. So if you're just trying to make awareness, which is something that Fortnite does, for example, it's a console game. So when you're advertising on social media, you can't link out to download it because it's on a console. Um, so for awareness campaigns, it does boil down to a CPM more often than not. There's other elements to it, obviously, that will come into play, but just on a very broad overview, CPM. So that is, for anyone that isn't aware, that is the cost they're paying per thousand views, which is a very old school advertising metric. But in influencer, you can actually tie it to demonstrable figures. Before it would be on the side of a bus, and you'd be like, well, we think you're going to get 100,000 people seeing this. We know for a fact that, on XYZ influencers content, you got 125,000 views, or you got this number of views. So it's, I don't want to say it's a vanity metric because it's not. Impressions count for an awareness thing because you can say, well, this is how many people have seen it. But then you have to combine it with things like engagement rate to understand that actually, yeah, 1 million people saw it, but if only one person commented, then what's the quality of that view? Um, and
Yeah,
then
that's
you
a
can get
challenge
more.
in knowing that the right people saw it, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So and
Mhm.
that's why we do as much research as possible beforehand to see what an audience it looks like for a creator, where they're
Mhm.
based, their age, gender breakdown, and we do that with tools that we have access to. There's a ton of them, but things like Tubular, Creator IQ, Modash, they all boil down to using the same API, which gives you the same data, but they'll all say they're slightly different. I don't think they are. Um, so yeah, it's about CPMs typically for an awareness campaign.
And how
If
are
you're
you able to
doing
like evaluate that the audience of the influencer is like the right audience for the brand? Curious.
so a brand will be like, we're targeting 18 to 35-year-old women
Mhm.
primarily. Obviously, there will be men in their audience, purchasing audience as well, but they know they have highest resonance with that audience. So we will use our tools to shortlist creators. Um, the brand will then be like, cool, yes, these ones are great. Please, can you double confirm their audience? And then we'll chat to the creators because there are going to be subtle differences between the numbers we see on our tools versus what a creator can pull up from their YouTube analytics, for example. But ultimately, the brand has oversight on that, and they will say, yep or no.
So going back to, can you give us an example of
Oh
a
yeah,
campaign that you've worked on where it was a great fit and you had great results? Yeah.
yeah. So one that I really want to talk about is we worked with. There's a couple of campaigns I want to talk about. The first one that comes to mind, which falls into the category of kind of an opinion leader, in my opinion. So for Black History Month this year, I believe in the UK it's in February, but in the US it's a different time of year. I might be completely wrong. I think it's different in the EU versus the US. But anyway, In February, we worked with Readercore, which is a home design app. It's a game first and foremost. It's very competitive. There is like a huge Facebook group where all these people were like, "My design looks better than yours," and people will post them and argue. But we worked with I want to say I forget the name of the channel. It's a US channel. It's called like HGTV or like Home Design. It's a home design channel. I forget what it's called.
HGTV. It's a very
Is
important
that what it's
channel.
called?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
well
Yeah.
remembered. This we worked with a creator called Tiffany, who is known for her really kind of eclectic, colorful home design, and also her personal story. So we worked with her to design an in-game room challenge that she designed herself. She took inspiration from her own home, so you can actually look at the pictures of her own home versus the one in the game, and it's like the same room. And her audience, she's like she's not a million plus followers. She's got around, I think, 100,000. So she's not some Mr. Beast. But her audience was super relevant, super engaged, and she herself had the right experience to work with on this campaign. And obviously, for an impact campaign around something like Black History Month, it's really important that the creator selection reflects the moment. And so she was so genuinely infused by the moment that she did a blog post as well with the brand. She did the in-game element, and then on top of that, did her social posts. And because of such a beautiful moment, a bunch of other creators got involved as well and shared Tiffany's content. And it was just this real organic moment that to me was an indicator of success because it resonated. This wasn't about the KPI here was not about we need to get this many installs, we need to do X, Y, Z. This was just about celebrating an important moment in the calendar for the game and its audience with the right creator. So that's an example of a campaign that isn't necessarily tied to a KPI beyond just quality content for the brand and the audience. So
And I guess
that falls
awareness
in.
with new audiences. Like, I mean, her audience wasn't. I mean, maybe I'm not understanding exactly, but like, her
Mhm.
audience was. I mean, her content was design related, right? And then it was
Yeah.
a promotion in a game. So, but there was you were somehow able to tell that there was overlap from like her audience to the audience for this game.
Yeah, ultimately, so the game is all about designing your own home. She's a
Hmm.
home design account, and she's known
Okay,
for that
okay.
on TV. So like her audience are like primed to be delivered home design content. Her audience was also, I believe, majority 18 to 35 female,
Hmm.
which the game know is their target audience, or roughly is their target audience. I'd have to double check. It was a while ago now.
Yeah.
But regardless, her audience aligned in terms of demographic and the content they were already consuming with what the game was all about. Like it was all about home design. It was all about developing your own creativity, and they were there for that. Yes, they did download and they did install. Um, what was great to see is that a lot of the comments were like, "I already played this game. I love it," and what that means from just kind of our perspective is we were in the right place because these audience members, some of them were already playing it, which means that the other audience members that weren't were more likely to be in tune with what this game is offering.
Hmm.
And then I guess another campaign that was like a little bit more. Um, sorry, my chair is really squeaky. I don't know if you can hear it.
Yeah.
I always
A little bit.
apologize,
It's
but
all
no
right.
one.
It's a
Okay,
natural
wait. Let
sound.
me.
My too. I keep moving, but it's all right.
If I
But
lean forward, it stops. Okay. Um, I'm shouting into the microphone. So a campaign um that I would say I'm just thinking top of my head. So we do campaigns with some really cool brands. The one that I would say set me on fire recently was Subway Surfers. So Subway Surfer is a game that really hit its stride in lockdown or just before, um, in those dark days. But it now is like it's just taken a life of its own. It's super popular. It's played millions and billions of times around the world. Billions is not an exaggeration. But they launched an artificial reality element to the game called Subway Surfers Studio. And the task there was to work with creators that fell within target verticals. So our positioning was that we think that given that this AR element allows you to add the characters from the game into the real world, If anyone's played, I don't want to compare it to Pokemon Go, but it's a similar thing where you can have a character appear as if it's in the real world through your phone. I'm explaining artificial reality. This is like, oh,
Yeah.
sorry, not artificial reality,
Augmented, yeah.
augmented. Yeah, augmented reality. For those that don't know, but I feel like at this point it's like a known thing.
Mm.
Um, so our positioning was, hey, you need to work with VFX creators. We've worked with them in the past for campaigns with other games, and if you're looking to make content with the emphasis on the word cool, content that is exciting, we think that VFX hits a happy medium between audiences that play mobile games and audiences that are primed to be wowed. So we're in the business of making cool content, and we think that would work for you. So what we ended up doing was working with VFX creators to put their twist on this augmented reality element, but actually using the assets from in the game, which I thought was really cool. They're not like making new pieces; they are using them in their content. And then we also worked with lifestyle and comedy creators, and dance creators, because actually when you add these augmented reality elements into the real world, they have like emotes. I don't know how best to describe them. Like these characters will behave in a certain way. So we worked with dancers to recreate those. And just overall, the campaign hit a fantastic CPM. It was very low. The impressions over delivered massively. And we just had, although it was only 6 creators, which is on the smaller side of things for us, they were all huge within their own niches. So that was speaking more to a tactic there. Sometimes you can work with 100 micro creators, but oftentimes if you want to make a solid piece of content that reaches a huge audience with zero brand spend on boosting to like amplify that content, for me a good play is either have a mixed bag of mid-sized to hero creators, or just go all in on the biggest within each of their verticals, because you know that people are really going to pay attention. They are astronomical in reach for a reason. So oftentimes if you're looking to make a splash, my advice is to at least include a percentage of your budget towards these really big creators, because they are hero creators for a reason. But then obviously for awareness, if you're looking to drive installs, then a mixed bag approach makes total sense.
Do you ever use boosting, or do you think it's generally not the best way to spend your money?
Some clients like it. So
Hmm.
specifically around Sparks on TikTok, it's a way of boosting, of using influencer content as paid media, because
Hmm.
typically influencer content converts much higher than own brand content. So me being like, I'm Coca-Cola, buy our drink, isn't going to convert as well as me saying, hi guys, I love to start my day. I wouldn't start my day with Coke, but like I love to start my day with this lovely coffee. Is
Yeah.
going to convert better because I'm approachable. I'd like to think
Yeah.
approachable. I'm delivering it as a human, and you resonate better with me saying it because I'm an identifiable figure rather than a face to a brand.
Mm.
So brands do like it, and will very often come to us and be like, I want to allocate this much spend to boosting
But
for
they'll
driving
actually boost on
conversions.
the influencer's channel, or the influence will create content for their channel and then they boost it.
Good question. So actually, it's a mix of both.
Mm.
Oftentimes, brands would like to secure usage for a piece of
Mhm.
content so that they can then make a cut down, or we can make the cut down for them and they run it. Because
Mhm.
it just goes hand in hand. Like as a marketing mix, if you've got paid influencer, they just work so well together. Often the paid teams, if the influencer team comes to them, to the paid team, and they're like, "Hey, we've got usage on this for 3 months," the paid team are like over the moon because they know that that is going to convert better than the stuff that they're using. But at the very minimum, it means they don't have to like create as many assets next month to run unpaid. So it just works hand in hand. There's
Mhm.
different approaches to it. Sometimes brands to secure upfront, which tends to be more cost effective. Other times they'll see it perform well on the influencer's channel, then come back and say, "Hey, we want this for 3 months." At which point it it becomes renegotiating with the creator, which can up the fee. Typically, does up the fee just because it's like it wasn't negotiated up front. You're now asking for something else, so therefore you have to pay for it, which
Mhm.
is a logical conclusion.
Yeah. And then One thing I was wondering when you were talking about the first example of the design influencer partnership, it sounded like the brand was very involved. Like they had to essentially create this custom part of their
Mhm.
game and everything. So how do you get the right like stakeholders involved from the brand and like, kind of like get them to buy into being part of this? Like I know a lot of times maybe a brand just wants to outsource the function of influencer marketing to an agency. So it sounds like you're working very hand in hand with the brands. How do you build that kind of
Mhm.
relationship?
Well, it's a good point. We're very lucky that the majority of our partnerships are brand direct.
Hmm.
You know, agencies are great
Hmm.
as middlemen, but
Hmm.
I prefer to work direct with the brand because we do have that freedom of flow between us and the brand. We can be brought into meetings with, the top dogs, explain the position, perhaps on behalf of whoever is trying to win that budget to spend with us or to spend on
Hmm.
influencer, and just explain the method to the madness and give them insight into what we're seeing with other partners. Um, because with influencer, there is so many elements to it that I think on a surface level, yeah, we can. Someone from within the brand can send an email to
Hmm.
XYZ creator and contract them from deliverables. But what they
Hmm.
don't have is insight to how they've charged before, to how they've
Hmm.
performed before, to what their content should look like, to what how many emails go into negotiating with creators. There's a reason we have a whole campaign management team is because, depending on the vertical and also the size of the creators, it can be quite heavy lift to do alongside your your main job role if you are working in marketing. So that's very often why we're brought in because we already have those details in that relationship. We can lean on it. We can say, well, look, you charged us this last month. There's no way that we can increase to double that this month. Like that's just not fair to the brand because your rates have changed. Like we have that insight. Um, but obviously, it does boil down to the deliverables, paying the creator fairly for their time, but also making sure that we're prioritizing the KPI for the client. Um, Being involved in the team as closely as possible really, really helps with that, and ultimately secures more bang for the client's buck.
I was going to ask you, have you ever seen a brand like get it wrong with an influencer partnership, and how important do you think it is to like make sure that you work with influencers who share the same values as your company?
Oh my gosh, you see it wrong all the time. Like,
Hmm.
obviously there was a really high profile case. We spoke about this not too long ago, the Dylan Mulverney case.
Hmm.
Without going into too much detail, I think at the very basic level, if you're going to work with an influencer, you need to have the gumption to then back them up if something goes wrong.
Hmm.
Whether or not, and in this instance, it was nothing to do with the creator's behavior. It was a certain subset of the internet. Um, so at a very basic level, this is why we work so closely with the brand because the brand needs to be aware of what we're doing so that they can support it, so that it's not coming as a surprise. It can be sold into the higher team, so everyone is on board, and that is very clearly the case here with Bud Light. That didn't happen. Um, the higher ups had no idea they were doing this campaign. The campaign idea itself wasn't groundbreaking. Putting someone's face on a bottle, like Kate Moss has been on Diet Coke for as long as I can remember. It's not a new idea. It was a really sweet idea, and it just showed that everybody wants to. I don't think they sell Bud Light in the UK, but everybody wants to drink a low calorie or something beer. Um, but obviously, when the stuff hit the fan, the wider teams weren't briefed in. Not everyone had an idea this was happening. So people being thrown under the bus, and no one more than Dylan. Um, and it reflected badly, and how they handled it was bad. I have so many thoughts on it that I would go into at length with you, but just on a
Yeah.
very surface level, I think that the whole team needs to be sold in on an idea. Um, and you can't just have an intern run off and do something, and when it goes down the Swanee, swing back and be like, well, we didn't like this idea anyway. So that's why we try to be as involved as possible because it needs to make sense within the overarching idea of the brand strategy. Um, I There was a great example in the UK where it was a hoax, but a bunch of reality TV stars were contacted by a fake brand that was selling a drink, for example. I think it was a drink. and under the key ingredients was arsenic. And the reason they did this was to highlight that um, there was an approach to influence that was just like, here's money, do this brand deal, put this on
Yeah.
Instagram stories. So that's another instance of like just going for creative with numbers that makes no sense. I think you have to look into the granular detail to make sure a creator reflects the audience you know works for you, and also the strategy that you have moving forward. Um, Off the top of my head, I actually can't think of any brands that I've seen recently. I don't surround myself with that. But I can't think of any brands that I've seen recently. I've been like, ooh, what was that?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. But I mean, that example that you just gave is a good one. I mean, it's obviously not going to seem sincere, the endorsement essentially,
yeah.
if it's just a monetary transaction. It has to
Well,
be
oh,
something. Yeah.
yeah. Sorry, I can kind of give an opposite example. What we had recently with a campaign was we reached out to these creators, and every single one, bar none,
Mhm.
said how much they loved the brand and they were so excited to work on the campaign. And I had to first of all, I had to feed back to the brand on that because that's a rare occasion. Um, I mean, I don't want to pat myself on the back and say that's how great our creator selection was. But I do think it boiled down to creator selection, obviously. But moreover, it speaks to the fact that you're working with a fantastic brand, because everyone loved the idea of working with them. We had 100% feedback, 100% response rate from all the creators we reached out to, with lots of exclamation marks. And overall, it just means that you're going to get an organic piece of content that makes sense. You're going to get genuine, authentic joy from the creator. And you would then hope that converts well to the audience because people tend to follow, well, the people you follow online falls into two camps. Either people that are so very different to you or people that you resonate with. So you will follow people that speak to your values, to your taste in things. And there's a high likelihood if a creator loves this brand, the audience will too. So I just love that's like kind of a personal favorite of mine is when you're reaching out to a creator and they're like, "Oh my god, I love Fortnite. I need to work on this campaign with you. Let's do this right now." Versus like, I'm not really. You can sense when a creator's not a fan of a product, and for me, that's a red flag. And oftentimes they won't accept the brand deal anyway. But if they, you're getting down the line and you're sensing that this is kind of not a willing partnership, that's normally a sign that things need to change, personally.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so what happens when you're in that situation when you don't have influencers eager to work with the brand? I mean, I guess that means the brand has to work on their own marketing first or their own channels. Yeah.
Um, so what has happened in the past, if a creator that the brand is like, we have to work with this creator, and the creator, not that they don't like the brand, but they aren't familiar,
Hmm.
oftentimes we'll sit down with the creator and talk them through kind of the brand, the strategy, what's going on here. And 90% of the time they come around, they're like, oh, okay, that makes so much sense. Yeah, I can see why this works. Um, because we do work with sort of startups and smaller brands that don't have that awareness. And that's not to say that these guys can't work with creators. Oftentimes they're the perfect candidate because they're breaking into a space for the first time. But it does require a little bit more strategy, a little bit more explanation with the creator. Um, but no, if a creator isn't familiar with a brand, that's different to them not liking the brand. And in honesty, I've never had. Finance is something that does become slightly tricky because it is a lot of creators don't want to give seem to be giving financial advice. So I have had that in the past where they're like, this doesn't feel good for me. But I would say that feels different to them not liking the brand. In all honesty, I haven't had many people dislike a brand. Um, but it does come down to sort of just having those conversations with the creator. And if they're a hard no, then you let the brand know and you pivot and you change. And we're quick thinkers at Cherry Pick, so we like to fill that space with the next amazing creator we find.
Well, I think it's time to wrap up, but I wanted to just ask if you have any kind of parting advice for anyone, for any brands that are thinking about trying influencer marketing.
Do it. No, I think my advice would be do it, but take your time to approach it with a level head and not get overexcited by kind of well, don't get overexcited, but make sure that you're looking at the stats that make sense. You drill down what your KPI is. Do you go in with a clear vision of what you want to obtain from the partnership or partnerships? And my advice is to do the campaign justice, to do both the brand and the creators justice. If you are giving this to someone on your team that already has a full-time job within marketing in your team, I'm going to let you know now that I think it's very unlikely they can take on a whole influencer marketing campaign from the get-go unless they have experience before from doing it. So I would say work with an agency that's reputable, work with an agency that you get along with, because ultimately there's a lot that can go wrong in influencer marketing. It's like late nights on weekends, it's emails all hours of the day, it's briefing creators on Zoom calls, working with the different departments in the team. There's a lot that goes on in influencer marketing that requires a lot of attention that I think an agency is best suited to service, just purely because it's very unsociable sometimes. But it's also high bandwidth in terms of running the campaign. And again, we don't represent creators at Cherry Pick. I think that's a slight conflict of interest, so we don't do it. But the beauty of that means we can reach out to anyone we have relationships with, and anyone that we don't, which is rare at this point, but anyone that we don't, we will be able to contact because we have the network to do that. And I think that is the beauty of working with an agency, is that there's a little bit wider scope to work with any creator that would suit your brand. So I think do it. I think take the time to approach it with a clear vision of what you want, and lean on those that have the experience to help you and assist you deliver, and then keep delivering, because influencer marketing works, and it can work for most brands if done correctly and slotted into their overarching campaign ideas.
Great tips. Well, thank you so much, Nikki, for sharing your insights with us today. I know I learned a lot, and I'm sure that our audience did too. So thanks for being here.
Oh no, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Excellent. So, for our audience, if you'd like to learn more about Nikki and Cherry Pick Talent, you can check out the website cherrypicktalent.com, and also follow Nikki on LinkedIn. It's Niki Albon, and we'll have all this information in the show notes. And then, yeah, that's all for today. Thanks to everyone for listening in. For more perspectives on global content marketing, be sure to check out veracontent.com/mix. And if you'd like to get in touch with us, or if you have any interesting topic for an upcoming episode, feel free to reach out at mix@veracontent.com. And keep tuning in for more perspectives on topics related to global content marketing. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.